Production funding for Behind the Headlines is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
The debate over the fairgrounds redevelopment tonight on Behind the Headlines. I'm Eric Barnes, publisher of the Memphis Daily News. Thanks for joining us. I'm joined tonight by Kemp Conrad from the Memphis City Council. Thanks for being here.
Eric, thanks for having me.
Kevin Kane from the Memphis Convention and Visitors Bureau. Thank you. Sorry about that. Taylor Berger, a small business owner and real estate broker. Thanks for being here.
Thanks.
And Bill Dries, senior reporter with the Memphis Daily News. We'll talk, you all have various perspectives on this of opponents and proponents and concerns, and we'll try to walk through all the details. I'm going to start with Bill, and maybe Kevin, you can pipe in as well, on just give viewers who haven't read on the most recent iteration, what is the proposal for the fairgrounds redevelopment, and then we'll continue to break it down.
Well, what you're dealing with is basically a renovation, a reconfiguration of the fairgrounds as amateur sports, as places where sports tournaments are played, not just locally, but you know, leagues coming from around the country to tournaments on the fairground site. You would also have on there some kind of real estate component that's not athletic fields, which would be, I think there's been some talk, Kevin, about retail, as well as possibly a hotel, something like that. I think the one thing that we came out of the briefing on this past Tuesday at City Council with is that it's not going to be restaurants.
Right. And then also, before I get you in here, Kevin, there's talk of tearing down the Coliseum, which is always controversial talk,
right,
putting up a multi-purpose facility that the schools could use for graduations and could be used for other things. There's talk of additions to Fairview, what used to be called Fairview Middle School and is now the Maxine Smith STEAM Academy. There's some money for schools, and we'll get into all those details. From your point of view, Kevin, what do we miss? Is that the kind of the shape of the project as you see it?
Well, I think that the Tourism Development Zone Act was created in 2004, and it was basically created across the state as a vehicle to build convention centers. And the first few were used that way. In 2007, the Tourism Development Zone Act or law was amended to include sports-related facilities. And you know, our first one was really built around our convention center, even though it was really for construction of the FedEx Forum. And then it got shifted in the latter years to center around another started out to be a sports facility, the Pyramid, that later would become Bass Pro. And it's worked quite well. It's generated a lot of money. It's done everything that we wanted it to do. There's 12 of these across the state. When you look at the dollar volume that Nashville and some areas in East Tennessee have been able to garner off this, we're really on the short end of the stick. So, you know, on the simple math, I would say if we could turn all of Shelby County into one big TDZ, shame on us for not doing it. I don't think the state would allow us to do that. But, you know, TDZs are basically money that would be going to Nashville that you're
right,
able to keep here
and
in Memphis.
Essentially, in my really layman's terms here, it intercepts that sales tax money that normally when you pay
Correct.
What, 9.25% or whatever we pay.
The growth, not there's a baseline
okay,
that's established, so that still goes to the state of Tennessee. We will keep the growth that is generated, hopefully by you know, rising tide lifting all boats.
Right, people coming to town, people coming to these youth sports things, spending money at the retail there, spending money at other areas within Midtown, and that's the idea, and that money, instead of going to Nashville.
And the concept around the fairgrounds is because we have Liberty Bowl Stadium and you have the Children's Museum that obviously draws you know, tons of families and youth. And now we have the Kroc Center, is to build on that and to turn that into something that would attract the youth sports market. So, of course, I'm a supporter for an indoor sportsplex more so than a bunch of ball fields. And I think, you know, in time, if it happens, conventional wisdom will prevail.
Okay. All right. Taylor, let me bring you in. You're known for being part of Untapped down at Tennessee Brewery. You've got restaurants around town, real estate broker, a lot of stuff in Midtown, a lot of kind of, I don't know, people have said sort of cutting edge things and so on. You're real concerned about this proposal. Is it, you don't want a big youth sports facility on the fairgrounds, or is it more about the funding, or what?
It's always really exciting to build something new. I mean, I love doing it, but I wonder that in all that excitement, we kind of lose perspective on what we're building and whether it's really sustainable. Youth sports is a growing industry. I think something like $7 billion a year. Frankly, we're a little bit late to the game. If we'd done this 10 years ago, we would have been ahead of the game. But since that time, many municipalities across the country have been building these things, and a lot of them are not doing so well.
Yeah.
You know, Memphis is cool. I love it. But, you know, we're competing against Nashville and, you know, East Tennessee in our own state, as well as Orlando and Las Vegas. Everybody has kind of got these things now. So I wonder, you know, is the impact going to be as big as we hope? And
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
But do you have concerns from, you know, you own restaurants, and there could be, I guess there's now talk that there wouldn't be a restaurant on the fairgrounds, partly in deference to Cooper Young and all the restaurants are there in Overton Square and so on. But I mean, do you worry that it's just, I mean, there may be viewers out there looking and say, oh, he's just, you know, he didn't want anybody to get on his territory, on the business he owns. Is that part of your concern? I mean, it's just more competition?
If this succeeds, then I think I and all the other merchants in the area do better.
Yeah.
You know, it's just a question of, you know, just because we build it doesn't necessarily mean they will come. And if we do build, you know, youth sports, 1 million square feet, the cost of maintaining that, the costs of operating it can be huge. And I wonder where that cost will ultimately lie.
Yeah.
I mean, will they be coming to the city?
Yeah, well, let's ask the councilman. I mean, you technically the council voted in support of a fairgrounds proposal, TDZ, excuse me, a couple years ago, if I'm not mistaken. But we talked a little before the show, and others who've been on the council recently said, hey, I think they need to come back. The program has changed. We need some more details. So you've got concerns about it, or
well, that was
questions?
always the plan. That hey, we approved the overall concept, but there were a lot of details to be worked out. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to have it in committee, so we could learn what had happened since we voted on it, get the latest kind of updates, and a lot has changed. And I would call it overall kind of half-baked right now. We need to fully bake this cake if we want to get it passed in Nashville. Mr. Berger raises some great questions about operations. One of the things that I think would help get this passed and get all the stakeholders aligned is to go ahead and lock in now the governance structure. You know, we have a sports authority board that was focused on youth sports many years ago, I believe. They went to then focus on building the FedEx Forum, and I think it's pretty much lying dormant now. That might be a good collaborative structure that we can bring back and go ahead and put the governance in place. So we have someone from the city, someone from the county, someone from the CVB, someone from Game Day Baseball, someone from Mike Rose. One thing too, you know, the key to success in any business or any government or any city is you got to figure out what are your competitive advantages. What are the things that you have that are very unique, that are hard to replicate, and you leverage those. You focus on 2 or 3 things and you do those well. You don't try to be all things to all people. And I would disagree a little bit with Mr. Berger, because we're not starting from scratch here. It's not like we're saying, you know what, we're going to use sports. You know, let's go chase this new dream. We do chase a lot of dreams. We do build too many things and have kind of project envy when we should focus on the basics of city government and focus more on kind of children and families and issues like that. But we already have huge community assets here. We're doing youth sports now. Game Day Baseball, I think, creates 30,000 room nights a year.
It creates over 30,000 room nights, and they want to expand because they're busting at the seams.
So my thing is, this can't just be a Memphis City Fairgrounds project. We've got to collaborate. A lot of times the city is not very good at collaborating. You've got Game Day Baseball, you've got Mike Rose, you've got Snowden Grove. I bet there's over 100,000 hotel room nights a year. I don't know. If we got 30,000, multiplying it by 3, maybe it's a little bit less. Those are hotel room nights. Those are people buying restaurant meals. You've got a nephew who's very good at athletics. I've coached him before. I guarantee you he's going to be on the road soon with his mom, his dad, his brother, his sister, and they're going to be out for a whole weekend. They're going to be staying in hotel rooms. They're going to be buying meals. Youth sports, done right, is a very, very economical way to do economic development. We've got a huge opportunity, but we got to do it right. We got to do it right now. We got to get the stakeholders on board, and then we can get it passed and make this a success.
One more question, I'll get Bill in here. But so you just made a great case to vote yes, but you still have some concerns. Is it the funding and a big question always comes up with these deals is, ultimately, if it fails, for whatever reason, we go into a recession, are the taxpayers of Memphis on the hook to continue to pay for this for the next 20 years?
First of all, the devil's in the details. I agree that the concept is good, but now the details need to be worked out. Mr. Berger's done a great job of raising some of these questions. Operations, operating expenses. Exactly what's going to be programmed there, we don't even know. There was a report back in 2013, the Charlie Johnson report, that laid out where the opportunity was, the multi-purpose stadium and things like this. yeah, I would not support it as it is now until and it's never going to pass until we get these things worked out. What was your second question?
No, that's good. And Kevin wants to say, let me get Kevin.
Well,
and then we'll go to
first of
Bill.
all, and I got a great deal of respect for Taylor. I'm a big fan of his. He's done some great things throughout the community. He's been great for tourism. But I vehemently disagree. We're not late to the game. Memphis is a great youth sports market. Micro soccer complex, go out there any weekend, you look at what's going on, taking place there, they're looking to expand. They want to get bigger because they are busting at the seams with opportunities for events. Game Day Baseball, even though they lost their title sponsor, Game Day Baseball, which is privately owned, by the way, which is kind of rare for these type of multi-purpose facilities or multi-sportsplex with lots of ball fields or courts or whatever it might be. They're busting at the seams. They want to expand. They don't have any available weekends. We're bringing tournaments in from all over the country. Volleyball, this weekend at the Cook Convention Center, the next 2 weekends, we'll have 7,000 people in town for youth volleyball, the Martin Luther King volleyball tournament. We had a big gymnastics tournament at the Convention Center 2 weekends ago. We have AAU basketball that's here in the summer for 4 or 5 weeks in the summer, 13 and 14s. We've had for many, many years that we have to spread out in 4 or 5 high school gyms in the eastern part of the county. We're a great youth sports market, and we can get better. So we're not late to the game.
Well, and I will say,
I think we're trying to build on that opportunity.
It's amazing to see. I mean, our daughters played on the same competitive volleyball team years ago, and I remember going to a tournament in St. Louis, and I spent ungodly sums of money that weekend. I mean, so if people think it is sort of church league basketball or church, it's a whole different deal. Nothing wrong with church league basketball. This is a whole different deal when you get into these competitive sports. But Bill, let's get you in here.
Let's talk about the Mid-South Coliseum, because it seems to me as if some of the discussion about whether the Coliseum stays or goes, it is fueling almost a separate discussion from the one about amateur sports. Taylor, how much of your concern is based on the Coliseum going in this?
Personally, not a whole lot. I mean, if this goes forward, I want, if we can use an existing facility, I think that's smart. If it doesn't work for what we're going to do, then it doesn't work. I don't think we can hold on to something just for nostalgia. But there is a massive contingency of people in the community who have a large problem with getting rid of the Coliseum.
I'd love to respond to that.
Yeah, we'll get to it. We'll just hang on. No, we got lots of time, but hold that thought. So, and that's interesting because you were involved with the Tennessee Brewery, and that was partly about keeping that thing alive, but you're a little less nostalgic on the Coliseum.
I am. I mean, I think, this is, if we do youth sports, it has to operate well first. I mean, we can't let this fail if it does go forward. And if the Coliseum is an impediment to that, then it has to go. I mean, we can't let something large fail because of nostalgia.
Kemp, you were at the council discussion, obviously, when the Coliseum came up, not as a main component of the council's discussion, but certainly there was some back and forth about how much does it cost to renovate. Where are you in terms of considering that?
I think the data should drive the decision, pure and simple. If we're going to be great at youth sports, we need to, and that was one of my frustrations in the meeting was that there wasn't, the program really wasn't together. So if we're going to be great at youth sports, and if this is going to be successful over 20 years, we've got to put the right programming in here. Now, the data that I've seen, that I've really started to kind of dig back into now, the data really points to needing kind of this multiplex to do the basketball. I think that's our one weakness. So and then I think you asked about taxpayer funds. What they told us Tuesday was that these would be revenue bonds, not backed by the city. So there would not be any city commitment to it. Now, if the thing were to default, there's still issues that come up. You don't want
taxpayers are the ultimate backstop on
disaster.
No,
not with revenue bonds. Now, someone's going to have to come in. There might be a it causes challenges. So we've got to really make sure that we buy into the underwriting, through that due diligence process.
So it doesn't hurt it doesn't impact
the taxpayers would not. The taxpayers would not be on the hook.
But what about credit rating, or if the city wants to go do other things, this is totally off the books in terms of
they're revenue bonds.
Okay.
That's right.
All right.
So.
Kevin, your point about this, there's some nostalgia factor for you with the Coliseum.
I played for the Tigers JV basketball team in the 70s at the Mid-South Coliseum. I saw all my first concerts. I got a lot of great memories of the Mid-South Coliseum. The reality of it is the Mid-South Coliseum is functionally obsolete for a couple of reasons. Number one, ADA requirements. It would cost millions to bring that up to code. The lighting in the building, they don't even manufacture those lights anymore. You'd have to do a whole new lighting grid. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars. I think to get the Coliseum up to code and to get it modernized would cost as much as $28-30 million is what I've heard, which is about what one of these modern indoor multi-court sportsplex that could have 6 or 7 basketball courts with a championship court that, for championship events, graduations, Lady Tigers basketball, whatever you want to do in there, that could also be used for volleyball, gymnastics, cheerleading, and other types of activities. The problem with the Coliseum, with 11,200 seats and the way the building is built, you can't make a lot of those seats disappear. They're built into the structure of the building. Yeah. You'd almost have to tear the walls and the whole side of the building around the building to make that work. So the footprint that you have to work with does not even lend itself to have 2 basketball courts in there, much less 5 or 6. So, it just doesn't work, and it's unfortunate. But, we had to tear down Ellis Auditorium a few years ago, and there was a lot of nostalgia about that. I can tell you, Ellis Auditorium is nowhere close in comparison to the building that the Cannon Center is now today. Sometimes you just got to say goodbye to some things, and you got to move forward. And I think, unfortunately, the Coliseum's lived its life.
Yeah. I should say, too, just so people, there are good stories on our side, on the CA side and so on this, but what we're talking about is a $30 million multipurpose facility, a 30-year bond, and, paid from what they're estimating to be $340 million in incremental sales tax revenue over that 30-year period. So we're talking about big money.
That otherwise would have gone to the state.
That otherwise would have gone to the state. Right. No, and it's good because it somehow gets into the debate. I mean, we've talked a lot about pilots. I mean, so many pilots have been talked about on the show, and everybody who comes in and talks about pilots kind of hates them, but they want to use them, or hates them, or they want to stop. This is one where I'll just go to you, as a politician, a TDZ you like if the details get filled in, right? I mean, it's not a tax give. Any of these incentives get framed by some people as tax giveaways. This is not. From your point of view?
This is money that would otherwise go to the state of Tennessee. And so these are dollars that would go somewhere else. We're keeping them here to improve our community and to generate a lot of opportunity and business for restaurateurs and.
Right. But what about the perspective? I mean, you'll get people, and we've had people on the show who can say, if government's involved, it's a bad project. It should just stand on its own. If we want to get a youth sports facility on there, we want to get retail on there, we should just sell the land, and the private sector should just take care of the whole thing, and the government shouldn't be involved at all. Your response to that?
I think what we're trying to do is facilitate, private people coming in and then ultimately doing it. But someone has got to go, and get the support and get the stakeholders together. And we probably need to have more, private involved and not just be city-led. So I think it should be a collaborative approach.
Your take on that argument that people have that there shouldn't be any
there's
public sector
reason
involvement.
Why individuals or corporations don't build, for the most part, arenas, stadiums, convention centers, performing arts halls. There's a reason why the community owns those assets. Number one, the quality of life impact they have for a community. Number two, these things are not sustainable as for-profit ventures. I mean, we're so fortunate that the Grizzlies are on the hook for the operations of the FedEx Forum, because in Nashville, the Predators are not on the hook for the operation of Bridgestone Arena. Bridgestone Arena loses millions of dollars a year as a building. And the FedEx Forum probably doesn't make any money as a building. But if it loses money, the Grizzlies are on the hook for that. That was a real smart thing our governmental leaders did 15 years ago when they cut the deal with Mr. Heisley and the ownership group. So, you got to have these public facilities. We got to have convention centers. We got to have performing arts halls, and we got to have sports facilities if you want to be a world-class community.
Yeah. Bill.
Taylor, I think you have a point on that.
I mean, that's really my worry, is that I haven't seen anything about that kind of the private developer backstop idea. Yeah. All of this money that we're talking about, this free money, it goes to build the buildings.
Right.
But there's huge costs in operating and maintaining those buildings that nobody has really talked about.
Is that though part of the weakness of the plan that, if you compare it to, say, I know it's little apples and oranges, but you compare it to Overton Park or Overton Square. Bob Loeb, I mean, whatever you think about that project, Bob Loeb comes in and says, I'm going to put up, $20 million if the city will put up whatever, 5 to 10 for the parking garage and the water retention. The same thing with Graceland in the TDZ down there. Graceland has spent a ton of money down there. There's a kind of named partner. Is that part of the weakness with this? There's no named partner?
Yes, I mean, the irony of this is that a private developer came to the city, in 2007 with this same proposal.
Yeah.
But at that time, retail was great. Target was at the table. You had a named developer, somebody local with stature in the community saying, I'm going to invest substantial capital in this now if, you can put in some too, city, state. We don't have that now, and they'll say, well, we're going to put out an RFP, and that'll happen.
Right.
But let's go ahead and get those guidelines for what we're going to require. Are we going to require that developer who submits an RFP to backstop potential losses?
Yeah.
These are the things that need to be discussed now.
Do you agree with that, or are you? I mean, is that part of the concerns that people have about the project, that there's no named private partner? It feels to some people like a build it and they will come kind of project.
Well, I think Kevin said it. I think let's go get it approved and get the funds, and then I think that's when some of those details can be worked out. Now, I think there's a lot more that needs to be worked out, on the front end right now. Do we need to have the whole structure on the process? I don't think the city really. I think the idea is that we will go out and do an RFP and have a private. The city is not going to be the developer on this project.
Yeah, and I think that Wharton said to me when he was on the show, he talked about that and said, look, and I'm paraphrasing. And something extent of, look, if we get this thing approved, it's not like we're going to go start building before we have this partner in place.
That's right.
We're going to put that RFP, the request for proposal. We're going to talk to people and get them in.
The city
before
cannot
we
go out and
dig.
build a hotel and then go hire Hilton to run it. The
Right.
city's not going to go build a 60,000 square foot strip shopping center and go hire Simon Malls to come in here and operate the thing. I mean, that's ridiculous.
But that's the impression I think some people have.
But this is, as Kemp said, this has to be market driven. Whatever happens on the private side has to be market driven. And I think what will interest the private side, if you do the infrastructure right around on the rest of the footprint on the public piece, whether it's a multiplex, sportsplex, whatever it might be, when you do those things, that's what garners the interest of private developers, and that's where they will come to the table. This thing is a process. This is not something where you just wave a magic wand and you just make it happen. I mean, you got to go through a process. I think Taylor brings up some great points. I think you do need to make sure that you've looked at this thing very thoroughly, because you're right. The utility bill on a 8-court basketball complex, heck, the utility bills alone probably more than what bid fees for tournaments would bring. But unfortunately, a lot of this is not about bid fees for tournament. A lot of these complexes, whether it's a convention center or game day baseball or micro soccer, how many people do you bring to your community that stay in your hotels, that eat in your restaurants, that go to your attractions? How much taxes do they generate, and how much economic benefit do they generate for the community? I
just want to say too, I think the examples you gave, Overton Park, that there were Graceland, those were privately owned. So Bob Lowe bought Overton Square from a private owner.
Right.
Great. This is a city-owned asset right now. So I don't think that taxpayers would say, okay, Mr. Developer here, we're going to give this to you, go do what you want. I mean, I think the city needs to have a bit of control in a collaborative way. And the market will bear what's developed there, but there will be a private entity that will come in. You've got the private piece, and then you've got the kind of the youth sports piece of it and the operations piece, and the math has to work. And from an elected official standpoint, votes like this, like Redbird Stadium, these have very, very long tails to them, and we want to make very sure that they're done right.
Bill.
So the council voted on the concept once. Should the council vote on this again? And if it does it vote on that at before or after it gives the city its blessings to go ahead for a tourism development?
Perhaps. I think the council needs to really be engaged from this point forward, from here to the finish line, whether that's some kind of liaison or it comes back for a vote. I've got a bit of an open mind on that, but I definitely think that the council will be involved in some form or fashion from here until it gets approved and then ongoing. I think we have a duty.
Taylor, some of your hesitancy on this, some of your concern about this seems to be that the train's on the tracks.
I don't want a Midtown pyramid. I don't want to be back here in 10 years trying to figure out what to do with all these buildings that the private developers long ago left because he didn't want to bear the losses. So we're stuck with this, and now we got to figure out how to make it work. That scares me, and we will have used up all of the Midtown tax, sales tax increment for the next 30 years. I'll be 65.
And
I'll be a
Kevin,
little older than that.
and Kevin,
Just a couple minutes left.
you have a concern in this as well, and that is about timing, because as we talked before the show, the Tennessee Building Commission, the state leaders in Nashville, they've kind of had enough of the tourism development.
Absolutely. I think Taylor brings up great points, and I know that Kemp is thinking this through because he's been involved in so many of these projects to make sure that the city is protected in the long run, the citizens are protected in the long run. Get the tourism development zone and then figure out exactly how this thing should be structured. But if we don't get this tourism development zone, shame on us for giving $300 million over 30 years to state of Tennessee.
I agree with Kevin, and I think it will help us to get the vote in Nashville. I was in Nashville for the inauguration, and I talked to the treasurer. I talked to a lot of my friends in the House and the Senate, my friends in FNA, and I think if we measure twice and then cut once, it'll help us get that vote in Nashville. And I just think we got to think of flesh a few of these things out, have a bit more of a solid plan. I think we'll get the vote. And I think, with a lot of the things that Mr. Berger's talking about, we will have a great project that all Memphians can be proud of.
Okay. Just last second. Are you running for mayor? Or are you one of the only city council people who aren't running for mayor?
I'm not running for mayor.
Okay, all right.
I would like to work with and serve, a great mayor.
Okay.
And I like being on the council, and I would love to collaborate with a great
So
mayor.
we now have one who's not. Okay. Thank you all for being here. Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Eric.
Join us again next week. Good night.